Hello, I'm Erik Strid, and I'm the founder and principal owner of Consentus Wealth Advisors. Our firm is dedicated to helping families to design and implement a wealth plan that's consistent with their most important core values and vision for the future. In our work advising wealthy and affluent families, we've identified some of the key challenges and dangers which are faced by the wealthy and affluent families in their quest for success and meaning in their lives. Time after time, clients have told us that there's one fear that appears to be held in common by a great number of families, which is related to their children's attitudes about money. Many of our wealthy and affluent clients have often expressed the fear that wealth will negatively impact their children and grandchildren. In fact, many people are worried that their money may spoil or ruin their children, and that growing up affluent may become a handicap to their kids' successful development and happiness. Many fear that inherited wealth may lead to a number of bad habits, dysfunctions, and unhappiness, and there's no shortage of examples of families which have fallen prey to this danger. For most of our clients, their children are raised not wanting for anything. Many attend exclusive private schools, enjoy frequent vacations, country club membership, and access to the latest iPhone or Xbox. In many ways, this is a source of pride for their parents, who are pleased to provide their kids with such a comfortable upbringing, or happiness for grandparents who may take a secret joy in spoiling their grandchildren. However, in other ways, it raises real concerns about your children's relationship to money. In our conversations with many families, we've heard this concern expressed in many ways. Parents fear that their children have never known what it means to want something and may take for granted that all of their wants are fulfilled. Perhaps they may even expect it. Many are concerned that the children are not able to connect money with work, and they don't understand that it takes work in order to produce money in their lives. As a result, it's difficult to motivate children to work, do chores, or even help around the house. Finally, there's a worry that children have no concept of thrift, saving, and building wealth, but only understand consumption and spending. Although we may take pride in our ability to provide a great life for our kids, the flip side of this pride is that it may be doing our children the greatest possible disservice, because it robs them of the self-confidence and satisfaction of earning and saving their own money and enjoying the fruits of their own labor. Ironically, in our desire to provide them with all the material blessings of the world, we may be stealing from them one of the most important emotional and spiritual blessings in the world, the self-satisfaction of their own personal accomplishment. So what can be done about this? How can you add significant value to your kids' lives by helping them to navigate these difficult issues? In our discussions with many professional advisors, many feel like this is territory they don't want to tread at all. They feel like they're not equipped to help, and that the risk is too great to get involved with such deep issues. No matter how much the family may need help, they're just not equipped. So we've teamed up with Dr. Richard Orlando to help come up with some answers. Dr. Orlando has served as a trusted advisor, coach, and educator to affluent families who seek intergenerational success by preparing future generations in affluent families. His latest book is called Legacy: The Hidden Keys to Optimizing Your Family Wealth Decisions. And I recently had a chance to sit down with Richard to interview him about the key points in the book. I hope you enjoy our interview. Hello, I'm Erik Strid, and I'm here today with Dr. Richard Orlando, who's a noted expert in helping families to optimize their family wealth decisions and prepare future generations of affluent families to flourish and succeed. Dr. Orlando holds a master's degree in counseling and theology, as well as a doctorate in family systems, and has been working for over 25 years as a trusted advisor and coach to successful families. He recently published a book called Legacy: The Hidden Keys to Optimizing Your Family Wealth Decisions. And we're here today to discuss his book, as well as the insights he's learned from his long career in advising families on these topics. Welcome, Richard. So to get the conversation started, I'm interested in knowing your own personal motivations for the work that you do. I call it your own personal why. So if you would, tell me, why did you decide that this work was so important that you decided to dedicate your entire career to helping families in this way?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a combination of reasons. One being raised in a very large extended family. I just naturally had this affinity to understand what makes families tick, why they flourish, why they don't flourish, and which ultimately led to getting a Ph.D. in family systems. But along the way, and more importantly, as I was working alongside advisors, like you and I are doing, and the actual client, and getting behind the scenes, and in essence, getting to the kitchen table of their lives, what's important, what are they thinking about, I found that much of the conventional wisdom that they were being taught or shared or reading was just that. It was quite conventional and necessary, but definitely not sufficient. And I thought what they were teaching me and what I was learning from my own research and my own work, I thought it was important to really kind of bring it all together in a way that would address some of the topics that I would get to address with them at their kitchen table. And that also is what fed the book. It was a way to kind of bring some of that knowledge and insight and wisdom together. And as I've said in prior conversations, in many ways the book is co-authored with the various families I've got to sit with.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting to hear you say that. Getting into the book a little bit, the book emphasizes the importance of taking time for a client to clarify their family's values as a critical part of the wealth planning process. Why do you think that it's so important to focus on the family's values as part of this process?
Yeah. And to your credit, you have a book called Empowering Values, so we're very much aligned on the importance of it. I think because at the core of big decisions is this variable, what I'll call values. Whether the mom or the dad, or the matriarch or patriarch, or the next gen is actually using that language, really what's behind their big decisions is what's important to them. And I think values is one of those major ways to capture what's really important and why they're trying to do what they're doing, whether it's their estate planning or they're investing or whatever it might be. So helping a family who maybe hasn't quite thought about it that way articulate what those core values are. As I talk about in my book, it's one of the major variables of, I use the metaphor of a GPS to help the client navigate these decisions that don't always have a black and white answer or solution. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the personal GPS of the families we serve.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The GPS drives you in the right direction, I guess. I really enjoyed the story in the book that you told about your clients, the Paulsons, and how you helped them to really identify and clarify and pull out their core values. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that with them, the exercises you took them through, and then what kind of impact that had for them after you'd done that?
Yeah, so I forgot how I was introduced to this family, the Paulsons, and that's a pseudonym for the book. But the mother and father, who were the first people I met with, said they want to update their estate plan, and were really kind of, for the first time in a major way, now that they had accumulated and created a meaningful amount of wealth, wanted to shape an estate plan that best reflected what they were trying to accomplish in their future generations. So in terms of a process, one of my starting points in the process is to find out what are those core values. And we went a little bit beyond that. What is their purpose? What do they believe their family's purpose is and their wealth's purpose? What's the purpose of creating this wealth? And then in their case, they had a personal faith. So starting with that, of helping them understand that, clarify it, and then ultimately write it out. We did that. There's a couple of ways to do it, but with them, we have these value cards, literally a deck of cards, that sometimes helps, in a fun way, create that process to have couples or entire multiple generations of families go through this exercise where there's 52 cards, and each card represents a different value or priority in their life, or potential priority in their life, and they select the top 5 or 10, and then they share it together. And in doing that, you get to see where they're aligned, and they even get to see sometimes where they're not aligned. And in every family, not everyone has the exact values. So really the goal of the exercise with the Paulsons was to find what are those shared core values. And those core values and the purpose of their lives, and in their case, their faith, really helped shape. We created a family value statement, and then that kind of work begins to shape their estate plan. And let me get a little more practical. So one of the values, or one of the goals of their planning, was, in their language, they didn't want to take the edge off the children's lives. Now, we're talking about young adults. They were young adults in this case. So they want to make sure that whatever wealth planning, whatever wealth transfer intentions that were, in their words, didn't take the edge off. In their value system, they thought work ethic was very important, finding their way was very important, maintaining a core faith, the faith that the family shared, was very important. So ultimately, that carried out into their estate planning, and one of the goals they decided, as a result of really getting clear on that, was to not transfer it all to their children, but also to have a philanthropic piece to what happens with their children, so that the children would also learn to continue to give, not just receive on the wealth transfer side. So for them, we did that over a period of time, but for them that really helped also align where they were, the mother and father in this case, the matriarch and patriarch.
Together.
Yeah, together.
You find sometimes that they may not be so aligned heading into the process.
Yeah, which is normal. Right? It could be an educational level in terms of knowledge, but it also could be that there's a different lens, that it's not contradictory, it's just there's a couple of values or areas of focus that are different. Mm-hmm. So that is part of the value that we bring to families, is helping align that or find those shared core values, and then ultimately implement it in whether it's their financial planning or their estate planning.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That was really a great little excerpt in the book. So you also in the book, and I really appreciated the part of the book where you talk about the difference between financial IQ and life IQ, in particular developing each in children. So can you talk a little bit about how you define each of the two and why you feel it's important to create that distinction for children?
This is a question that's asked a lot, and so going back to what I said when you asked me the first question, part of what I consider the conventional wisdom, especially in the wealth management world, even just in general in the financial services world, it seems like the knee-jerk reaction or reflex is, when you think about talking about preparing the next generation, it seems to be synonymous with let's get them financially educated. And so to your point, I think that's absolutely relevant, important, and part of the overall development process. But if you stop there, it's not sufficient. That's not really what prepares the next generation. Having financial knowledge is very important, but I've never seen a trust decanted because someone didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond. Mm-hmm. So I brought in that understanding of what really we're trying to do as parents, and you and I are both parents. It's really developing their life IQ or their life maturity, so that they have the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to flourish in any context. And financial IQ is a category within that. But I see really the bigger goal is life IQ. And so that would be attributes that any parent, if you think about it, developing resilience in your children, confidence, purpose. These are the things that help people flourish, not just knowledge about investments or compounding interest, as important as it is, and we teach our children that as well.
Can be the harder work, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. It's a bigger journey on that part, yeah.
So along that line, and kind of drilling down on that a little bit, I know that a lot of the viewers of this video are going to be parents who have children in those critical years, maybe the adolescent or younger years, and many are feeling this difficult challenge of how to bring up children with the right habits and attitudes about money, particularly because they're affluent families. Either they have money or they're making a lot of money. So they find it difficult to create that balance for their kids. So you, in your book, you talk about the 10 principles of how to continue to build and create your children's life IQ. So if we could, I'd love to explore just a few of those principles and kind of get your reaction on what you mean by each of them and kind of how they can be impacted in a client's life. So one that you talk about is maximize your happiness, as in maximize your own happiness as a parent. So what does that mean, and how is that important for raising kids? Yeah,
I was a little surprised as I wrote the book. What became one of the first chapters was a chapter on happiness. Mm-hmm. It kind of surprised me in the sense that what I found was part of what parents were telling me as I was working with them or working with their entire family, a common statement, which is, I just want my kids to be happy. And what many parents are not aware of, there's actually a lot of research on what contributes to lasting happiness and purpose in lives, not just children or next genders, but all our lives. And to the degree we could shape our own lives or the next generation's lives in a way that contributes to lasting happiness, and I'm not talking about giggly feelings or pleasures all the time, but real purposeful living, it really helps, I think, what the parents are trying to do ultimately with what they're trying to do in the kind of raising their children and what they're trying to do with their wealth. But I start with, in the chapter on preparing the next generation, or what we're now calling preparing the rising generation, is help parents realize they're part of the preparation process of the next gener. So they're not fully responsible, but I see it as kind of as the child's younger, as parents, we're more responsible for their well-being, very practically, obviously. When they're young, literally, they can't survive without us. But as they become young adults, we need to kind of transfer the ownership or responsibility for preparing themselves. While we're doing that, how we model our lives is part of that shaping. Mm-hmm. And if we're not living fulfilled, purposeful lives, to whatever that means to us, I don't define it for people, it's what they find important in their lives, I think we begin to model in a very powerful way and message in a powerful way how to prepare them for a lasting, financial, flourishing, happy life. Mm. So part of my challenge to us parents in the book is that our part of that responsibility for preparing the next generation is that we also focus on preparing our lives in a way and living our lives in a way that sets a very powerful example of what they could do in their own lives, not by mimicking what we are doing, but by showing the benefits of a happy life and living a purposeful life. So that's one of the 10 attributes, or I call it principles and practices, that the parental generation could follow, as well as I offer 10 that the next generation, if they use them as a guide, will better prepare themselves for this, for their journeys. Mm-hmm. Or their life IQ, as I talk about.
So kind of a do as I do, not as I say kind of an example.
Yeah, yeah. In many ways, it's both and, but yeah, it's the it's not my expression, but we probably have heard virtues are caught, not taught.
Yes.
And that would be a way of highlighting what you just said. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Another of your 10 principles that struck me, prescriptions for parenting, was be the parent. So what does that mean, and why is that important?
Yeah, I was sitting with a very successful executive not too long ago, and we were just over a lunch. I was being introduced to this gentleman, and we were in this discussion. He had young adult children, maybe even a little bit younger than that. He had a number of children. And he said he's very busy, travels all the time, on the road quite a bit. I mean, a very expected traditional full-time schedule. And that meant very quantitatively, very little time with the family. Mm-hmm. And I said, you might want to just check with your children, what do they think about that? Because this was a very caring, this was a dad very conscious of this topic you and I are talking about. His version, he said, but I'm doing this to better prepare their lives, to give them opportunity. And I said, that may be awesome. It's your call, but you may want to check, since you do care, that trade-off worth it in their mind. So what I mean by be the parent is you and I can't be replaced by a nanny or just a vacuous, no paternal or maternal relationship there with your children. So it's literally being invested in their lives, however you choose to do that. But it also means being a parent in terms of not trying to be their friend. So children developmentally need parents to create the guardrails in their life, not micromanage their life, but create the guardrails. And going back to my understanding of developmentally, how we should do this is more so when they're younger, and then the more they get older, the more they start to shape their own guardrails. As long as there's no major issues in their life, like addiction or other things like that, which we have to hold on a little bit stronger there, or provide a different kind of guidance anyway. So being a parent is a combination of being invested in the children's lives and preparing them. And even if we don't have a lot of time to be with them, knowing who they are will help us better shape who else should be in their lives, mentors, role models, and things like that. So it's being present, being invested, but it's also about maintaining that relationship that's different, that you're not their friends, you're still their parent. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna leave a little room for viewers to actually read the book to find out the rest of the 10. But the third that I did want to that just struck me, and I did want to have you comment on, was you said be a perspective keeper. Mm. So what does that mean, and why is it important? And more importantly, what can parents do to be a perspective keeper?
So, assuming it's a family it's important to them that their children have a perspective that's not only what they might have as of today, which means that if one of your clients is creating or has created a lot of wealth, usually what that means is the children in that family, the next gen in that family, gets an exposure to a lifestyle that they yet can't afford. Mm-hmm. And maybe even not what the wealth-creating generation grew up in. So there's this, assuming that's the family profile, because it's a little bit different if you're generation 4 or 5 in a family of wealth. But in a family like that, the parents will always say to me, how do I, and sometimes they'll use this language, how do I keep the middle-class values that I grew up in, yet my children, and some have said to me, have never flown on a commercial plane yet. Mm-hmm. And there's that dance on the reality is I don't want to be ashamed of what we've worked hard to create, but I also don't want it to undermine the next generation. So that's when I talk about being a perspective keeper. So being a perspective keeper, I use 2 examples. Let's say most of your family vacations are at whatever you deem to be a luxury experience, which is very common. It's people want to enjoy, and celebrate their success. But one way to be a perspective keeper on that aspect is, what about a vacation once a year where the family has a very limited budget? And whatever that means to that family, an entire family has a $1,000 or $2,500 budget. Now they have to come around and say, how are we going to make the most of an experience like this? How are we going to do it? So it's less about all the luxury that's possible, but more about what meaning they want to put into it. So you can have a perspective of not every trip seems to have the same experience associated with it. Or another one could be that maybe part of our giving back is not just not only writing a check to a charity or a church or whatever it might be, but we as a family roll up our sleeves, and whatever that means, go to a community, go to a perspective that we don't typically have every day in our lives as a family, so that our children get that experience of not everyone gets to experience what we get to experience because of where we are financially. So helping create those experiences, not create guilt or shame about wealth, that's not the goal, is just to keep some perspective, because it could be easy to lose it when the wealth becomes the norm to be able to have experiences in life. So it's just trying to do little things like that, and just being conscious of it usually helps.
Yeah, you've identified something that I think a lot of the families we work with and our viewers really struggle with, is that balance. You want to be proud of what you're doing and what you're earning, and you want your family to enjoy it, but at the same time, how do we preserve those middle class values, as you called it? It's a great topic. So as a final question, Stephen Covey once said that the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. So before we depart, I'd love to give you a chance to help our viewers think about what's the main thing that you can't leave this interview without talking about in your book and your work.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I'd say at the end of the day, when we pass on, our legacy is not created then. So the name of the book is Legacy. Our legacy does not get created when we pass on or when we leave assets behind. Our legacy is being created today. The decisions you and I and our clients are making today, how we're choosing to live today, is shaping and creating our legacy. And so it's really about how we're going to live as opposed to what we're going to do when we pass. And how we choose to live will hit on all the topics you and I touched on. So the book is an attempt to create a path for the reader. It's not to give them their answers, because everyone's values and purpose and faith, for that matter, is unique to them. But it creates a path on the 5 big topics that influence and shape our legacy, which is the topics we're talking about and others.
Well, thank you, Richard, for your time today and for your wonderful work in this area. It's an important area, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future as well. So thanks for taking the time today.
You got it. Thank you.
Great. I hope this interview has been helpful to give you some ideas of strategies that work. This is an area that my firm and I are really passionate about, and we're dedicated to helping you to find success in raising your kids. In fact, we're working on a way we can provide more value to you by offering a more in-depth exploration of these topics and strategies for success. We're in process of putting the finishing touches on our long-awaited webinar series, and I'll be in touch soon with some more details on how you can take advantage of it. In the meantime, I also wanted to leave you with one final gift. Please feel free to download the attached article, which explores how one famous family was able to nail this problem. Finally, if you like the message of this video, I really want to hear from you. We'd love to get your comments, questions, and reactions to our content. So do me a favor and scroll down on your computer and click to like or leave me a comment or a question. Thanks for watching.